Okay, welcome everyone. It is Monday, July 27th, 2020. This is the Planning Board regular meeting and it's 7:01 p.m. Barbara, take it away.
Okay, this meeting is being conducted by electronic means in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, amended 2020, which explicitly permits a public body to conduct meetings electronically during a state of emergency. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster Asbury Park Press, and all notices are on file with the board secretary. In addition, a notice regarding this virtual meeting and instructions were published in the Asbury Park Press and the City of Asbury Park website. A copy of this notice is on file with the board secretary. The notices and conduct of this meeting are in accordance with the guidelines of virtual meetings issued by the New Jersey State of Community Affairs. Please note that all microphones of public users are muted until the public question or comment period. If you would like to speak during this time only, please use the raise hand button in Zoom if on a computer, or press *9 if on a telephone. Your name or last 4 digits of your phone number will be called when it is your turn to speak. If at any time during your question you are deemed to be out of line or topic, we reserve the right to mute your microphone and will make an announcement that this has occurred. During the public comment session only, the public has 3 minutes to speak. Please turn off your cell phones and electronic devices during the meeting. Please identify yourself before you speak at all times. And this meeting is being recorded and will be available to view via APTV. Please join me with the salute of the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to
of
the
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is that a roll call, Arena?
Yes, ma'am, sorry. Mayor John Moore,
Here.
Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton,
Here.
Michael Manzella,
Here.
Jim Henry,
Here,
Jennifer Souter,
Here.
Trudy Syfax is not here, Alexis Taylor,
Here.
Eric Gallipo,
Here.
Rick Lambert is here. He is on the call, but we can't see him. And Barbara Krizak.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the July 13th, 2020 regular meeting. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that? That's on the planning board? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Mike Manzella.
Jim Henry, second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mike Manzella and a second by Jim Henry. All in favor, say aye.
I
Any
have
opposed?
to abstain.
Who abstained?
I did, Barbara.
Barbara
Okay.
has abstained.
Okay.
Thank you. Minutes approved.
Okay, our first presentation is going to be a discussion about the City Council referral of STARS redevelopment plan amendment. Michelle Alonso will be doing the presentation.
Do you want to swear me in first?
Yes, I'll take care of that in 1 second. Has Jason gotten on? He sent me a text that he was having trouble getting
Not yet. I'm trying to get Jason
his-
and Rick
his
settled.
name.
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jason.
Donna's here. Okay. Okay. Please raise your right hand. Where is Michelle? Okay. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record, spell it, and give us your affiliation with the city.
Michelle Alonso. Alonso's ALONSO. I'm the Director of Planning and Redevelopment, and I'm a licensed professional planner with the state of New Jersey.
Okay. Michelle, before you begin, does anyone on the board not know our function on review of an amendment to a redevelopment plan? what we're supposed to do.
Jim Henry, Jack, I have a question about the resolution that was sent to us. In the first paragraph of the resolution, it says on July 5th, 2000, I'm sorry. I guess I read it wrong. I was curious because we have a 45-day window to look at this,
Yes.
and it appeared that we may be out of time already.
No,
If this was sent to us on the 10th of June,
well, mayor and council haven't proceeded, so we'll proceed.
okay, just
We've
want
done
to
it
point it out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, just for everyone's edification, according to the law, amendments to redevelopment plans and any other development regulation get sent over to us. Amendments to redevelopment plans must be reviewed typically within 45 days, or the council can proceed without us. Regular regulation for development is 35 days, or they can proceed without you. We're required to give a report, which is always in the form of a resolution with recommendations. So it's really under our advisement and review powers and recommendations. The formal action on the amendment to the redevelopment plan would be taken by the mayor and council after notice, opportunity to be heard by the public, and so on. So that's our task. And with that in mind, we'll let Michelle proceed.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're here tonight because the STARS redevelopment plan, the original that was adopted 20 years ago, is about to expire. So myself and Mark Siegel, my staff member, took the opportunity to take a close look at STARS and to give it a revision. Basically bring it up into 2020. And also to take a look at the bulk standards and to see, do they really work for this district? For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the STARS redevelopment plan area, it's on the west side. It's south of Springwood Avenue. Springwood Avenue used to be part of STARS before its own redevelopment plan was carved out. And it goes south to the Neptune border. The neighborhood is characterized by low density 1 and 2 family housing. There's a few multi-family dwelling units scattered here and there, but my department did an evaluation to see actually how many units there were in the neighborhood that was above a 2-family, and there were actually very few. There's a few outliers. Because the documents you received for tonight in your packet, you have my presentation where I'm going to explain some of the new standards and some of the rationale for the new standards. Because one of the things we did is we brought the density down a little bit to be more characteristic of the neighborhood. Very much like how we, with the master plan, took a re-examination of some of the neighborhoods that had zones for multifamily and look to see, does it fit the character of the neighborhood. So I'm going to start a share screen. Oh, except Irina disabled it.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So this is in your packet. So there's no surprises tonight, no surprise presentation. But the STARS redevelopment plan is 20 years old. It's about to expire. If we don't adopt a new plan, it goes to the R1A zoning, which our master plan recommends that we eliminate the R1A. And as I said, since we are readopting the plan, we re-looked at the standards and made new standards that fit more with the neighborhood. Here's a map of the area. As you can see, it begins right after the commercial portion of Springwood Avenue to the north, Atkins Avenue to the east, the Asbury Park boundary to the west, and the Asbury Park boundary to the south. It's Ridge Avenue, Ivy Place, DeWitt, Borden Avenue, and Atkins. in this redevelopment plan area, we've seen the most redevelopment activity on DeWitt Avenue. Under the STARS redevelopment plan, the city had sold a few lots to both Interfaith and Habitat for Humanity, and I believe another nonprofit redevelopment entity that's defunct. And they have built low density, one family, occasional two family homes for first time homeowner purchase. So right now the current plan permits detached single family and two family homes, attached single family and two family homes, and three family townhouses. It also permits public schools, parks, and playgrounds. And one of the things that had come up at the council meeting, that it also permits houses of worship, and that we've kept. I think someone erroneously thought that we didn't keep that, but we did. So in this amendment, we keep the detached single and two family dwelling units, which is the predominant housing type in the neighborhood. And we keep semi-attached single family and two family dwelling units because there's a few of those as well. And that gives a little bit of flexibility as well for anyone who has a narrow lot. And there's a few narrow lots here. Single family and two family townhouses we keep in the terms of if it's already a town, more not like a townhouse development, but houses that are attached. Because one of the things we took another look at is to make sure that all development has a door on the street. Because the way this plan was set up, someone could do a townhouse development where none of the doors face the street. Basically, it would be the equivalent of a multifamily apartment building. And we, of course, kept public schools, parks, playgrounds, and houses of worship. So this next slide is just a little cheat sheet of the current bulk standards of the existing plan and the proposed one. We decided to, the way the plan is written now, if you have an undersized lot of record, you could build up to a two family. We parsed that out and we put in a minimum lot size for a two family unit. And if you have under that, then you can always do a single family unit. Because what we were finding is that even though this plan permitted two families, whenever anyone came in to do a two family, they couldn't meet the bulk standards. And it wasn't, the way the old plan was written was try to give property owners a little bit of a break if you have an undersized lot, because the original minimum lot size for this area, no one could really achieve it unless they bought up multiple lots and combined. So that's also why we tailored the lot area, the bulk standards, and that you can't build any more than a two family here based upon, again, what we see as the lot sizes there and what people can realistically build and not overbuild on the lot. One of the differences in this area of town compared to just north of it, which is the R1, is that most of these lots are undersized or small. They're small. And that, but one of the things we've done here that we let the building coverage be 50%. STARS permitted 65%, but was worded a weird way where your house had 45%, your garage had 15%. We just combined it as a blanket 50%. So that also can include things such as sheds and other things that could count towards building requirements. And then one of the major changes we're proposing is the height. We're lowering the height by half story because the way this plan is written, you could do basically 3 stories, 35 feet. And that is not characteristic of this neighborhood. That means not really having a pitched roof or having a roof not with a lot of pitch. So we brought it back to what actually is in the R1 district in the regular zoning, a 2.5-story roof, which gives you the deeper pitch and is more characteristic of the neighborhood. Then one of the interesting things in this plan is a later amendment threw in some green standards. We took a second look at those green standards because the other thing we scrubbed the plan of was the commercial properties, because it was originally written with Springwood Avenue in the plan, that Springwood Avenue was taken out, but this plan still had design regs for commercial properties that no longer exist in the plan area. So like some of the stuff like operable windows, we know all that there's going to be operable windows. That's more of a standard for an office building. We changed the amendments to some of the things that we are more aligned with what we expect in development today. Solar panels, green roofs, Energy Star appliances, and most importantly, for the type of development that we see here, small scale, low density, facade fenestration of at least 10% of surface area. That has a bigger effect than some of the other green standards that were in this plan. We also made the parking standards more aligned with what is going to be the parking standards and the zoning amendments for single family and 2-family dwelling units, which would be that it'll be single family 2 spaces, 2 families 3 spaces. And then we did a catch-all for all other land uses that refer back to the zoning ordinance. Now, this is a little bit what I was talking about before. The bulks, like if we took the bulk standards that were in the current plan, you would get a house more to the right. And the author of the redevelopment plan, I know very well, and he and I used to work in Jersey City together. And this plan was written for basically to create a house in Jersey City. Like you see to the right, 3 stories, 35 feet, parking could be under the house, higher density than we typically see in Asbury Park. So the regulations that we put in would create more of a house to the left, and this is a photo of new construction in the neighborhood. That's an example of a 2.5-story building where the roof has a steeper pitch. And also the parking is to the side and in the back. And this is an example of, with the townhouse regulations, what it could produce. And that's one of the reasons we removed the townhouse design, because this is really not characteristic for the neighborhood, not characteristic for Asbury Park, and also not so characteristic with one of the goals of the plan, which is to promote first-time home ownership or promote home ownership, because it's harder for a first-time home buyer to actually get a mortgage for a 3-family home. So bring it back down to the 1 and the 2 fits in very nicely with Interfaith and Habitat's home ownership programs. So that's the condensed version of my presentation of the changes that are in the plan that you have before you tonight. I'm going to hit stop share. And I'm going to open it up to questions if the chairwoman so likes.
Absolutely. If anyone on the planning board has any questions or concerns?
That's just Jen. Oh, sorry. Jen Souter. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just had 2 questions. Section 3, the redevelopment objectives, item D, where it says the elimination of substandard and dilapidated structures and removal of blighting influences. How is that defined? Like how is that determined?
Well, that I have to say we left from the old plan. That is a standard catch-all phrase that you find in almost all redevelopment plans. So it's usually defined upon when this plan, before it was written, had an area need of redevelopment study that created the plan. Usually that's defined as something that is abandoned, inhabitable, boarded up, and the plan, the nature of creating a redevelopment plan unto itself is the mechanism to remove those blighting influences.
So it's identified by like an inspector, codes, or just brought to the attention of the city from.
The intention is that this redevelopment plan was created to remove blighting influences. In other words, to facilitate quicker development. But this plan, there's not going to be any eminent domain. No one is going out to inspect anyone's property in relation to this redevelopment plan. That's just standard language that's in many redevelopment plans for the creation of the redevelopment plan. To create a redevelopment plan, first you have to have what's called an area in need of redevelopment. The old word is blighted. Basically something that's a blight on the neighborhood, that's bringing the neighborhood down. And so then you have the power, the planning board, the municipal council, when something's considered blighted, to create the redevelopment plan that can give tools to incentivize redevelopment and push redevelopment along in a manner that regular zoning may not be able to do. Like, for example, for this redevelopment plan, we customize the zoning just for this zone so that it fits in with the neighborhood context. And also by keeping this redevelopment plan, it gives the municipal council the power to sell lots to a redeveloper without having to go to public auction. If we still had, if there were projects that were larger that would ask for long-term tax abatement, the council can do so, but we're not going to see that kind of activity in this plan area because it's so low density. But it's just that the goal is to uplift the neighborhood. The goal is any housing that is substandard, that the goal is to bring it up to, to bring it up and to remove any of the so-called bad physical influences on the neighborhood that may be bringing it down.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have one other quick question. This is a very tiny thing, but in that cheat sheet that you had, the, well, I'll refer to the actual document where it says green building design. I noticed you just plan, just one word was removed and it said something like solar power lighting are methods. And I think you just took the word some out. Was that intentional? It said that some methods that could be used.
Jen, can you repeat yourself because you broke up a little?
Sorry. So on, it's actually, if I refer to the green building design in the plan.
Yes.
Or number D or letter D, and then just number 1. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So that line number 1, I noticed in your comparison chart, there was just from old to new, there was only one word changed, and that was solar powered lighting are, it used to say some methods that could be used, and now it just says are methods. And I didn't know if that was intentional to say that those are the only ones that could be used now, or if that was just,
no,
or what, if that was intentional or just
that's
a word
just a
change.
typo. So we'll ensure that the word goes back in, because these are just some methods, and of course we don't want the plan to be static with time. So then of course if there are new technologies that develop, that we would be interested in them, new programs that develop, we would be interested in them.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions from the planning board?
I do. I have a couple questions. So, Michelle, thank you for bringing up the point that a 3-family mortgage is difficult to achieve for most first-time home buyers looking for affordability. What other aspects of affordability, if any, were considered as part of this plan? For example, was there a consideration of large assemblages for condos to be created? Condo, I'm not saying like stacked condos, but condo units where you could have 4 units or 5 units on a single lot that are divided into condos that result from the assemblage of smaller lots.
No, because from what we've seen in the neighborhood, most of the lots are small, and it would take an assemblage of many lots, and it would probably mean the displacement of people if a developer came in to put some lots together and develop a complex. And what we also saw about, now this is not condo, but some of the multifamilies in this district, they're not the best kept, and a lot of them are absentee landlords. I'm going to be very blunt. And one of the things we cannot do in zoning, we are not allowed to dictate ownership. So when you do zoning for a property, it could be rental, it could be condo. And that's one of the reasons, like, I shied away from higher density. And also I see this again, like our best partners in this neighborhood in terms of redevelopment have been Interfaith and Habitat for Humanity.
And have they expressed a specific desire to stay at 2 families or less?
They've been building 2 families or less because their programs are geared towards people buying a 1 family or 2 family.
But their programs aren't geared towards creating multifamily. I'll use the broader term, multifamily, and dividing it amongst multiple owners.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
That's because they can do what they do cheaper and quicker with a 2 and under. Or when I say cheaper and quicker, for them being the type of nonprofits they are, especially Habitat's model, they can't do they don't have the capacity to do manage larger projects.
So in your opinion, the way the text is written is the best way to preserve affordability within the neighborhood?
Yes, because the trade-off with affordability, as when we had this with Washington Avenue when we were doing the affordable housing plan, is not to displace people either. The vacant land that's available today in this area is just scattered 25 by 100 lots here and there.
Undersized.
Yeah, undersized. Well, no, per this plan and
not this plan.
Right, typical for this neighborhood, not undersized. But when we look at with creating affordable housing is, again, not displacing residents and changing characters of neighborhoods. What we like to see is also not to concentrate certain forms of affordable housing, but to put affordable housing in areas that are going to more naturally redevelop, and then have developers ensure that it's a mixed income building. So that was more the goal of our affordable housing plan. And I still think that, the STARS redevelopment plan was written for lower density housing. And I think that is still should be one of the goals of this redevelopment plan, considering the neighborhood context.
But there's nothing mandated in terms of affordability.
No, because except for programs by places like Interfaith that and doing it on a smaller scale, there's not incentives to do affordable housing by for-profit developers because of the scale is so low.
Other than density, which discussed.
Yeah.
So I just have one other question. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of run through how we got to these particular building forms. And in the proposed amendment, I see that it allows accessory structures. Can you just sort of run through what those accessory structures might be?
Typically, it's either a garage or more commonly what we see is a shed.
Okay, but it's not a second separate unit on the same lot.
No, because the way the zoning is written, you can't have that second unit in
Two
the back
principal
because of the
structures.
bulk standards.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I may interject. Also, for the board's consideration, I didn't read the other sentence after the first one, sorry. The planning board must identify any provision or provisions in the proposed redevelopment plan which are inconsistent with the master plan and recommendations concerning those inconsistencies and any other matters as the board deems appropriate, which is exactly what you're doing, but I wanted to make sure I got that on the record.
Does any other planning board member have any other questions? All right, then I'll go.
Sorry, Barbara.
I'll go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Who's going?
Oh, sorry, Jen. I have to
Go
get
ahead,
better
Jen.
at my hand raising. It's Jen Souter again. Just one quick question. Again, back to the elimination, the standard language, which is just moved from the old version and it's standard to say the elimination of substandard dilapidated structures and removal of blighting influences. Is it possible just to insert the word physical? I think when you said it back to me, you actually said physical or in the built environment. I know it might seem like a small thing, and I know it's standard language that's been used for a long time, but I was just wondering if that could be considered.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I will add that.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple questions, Michelle.
Sure.
On your presentation where you have on the current plan, I think it's probably the second page, where you list single family, 2-family, and 3-family townhomes as the current plan,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not going to have 3-family townhomes. You'd mentioned something about houses of worship, which is in the current plan. I didn't understand, are they in the proposed plan also or no?
Yes, they are.
Right,
They're
so that
under
moves over.
they're under conditional use. I just didn't put them in my chart because I just didn't put in the presentation chart, but they're still there.
Okay. The other thing is that I noticed that in the details of the amendment, there is mention of, requirements about parking lots and whatnot. And I didn't know if that was just a leftover from the Springwood retail, or was that meant to stay there, that parking lots are allowed?
No, parking lots are not allowed. There should be standards just for parking lots as they pertain to residential uses.
Okay, so on page 11 of the amendment, would that, like number 2, where it
Wait,
says
let me-
parking lots of 5 vehicles or more, should that remain in there, or?
Wait, let me click, Barbara.
Yeah, on page 11.
We would want to keep that for a house of worship use, a school use. So we want to keep that in there.
Okay. The other question that I had, and this has to do on the next one, on the green requirements.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if it mattered or if we should do, where it says where you have the solar panels, green roofs, stormwater recharging, and water-powered lighting, solar-powered lighting, are some methods. Instead of that would it make sense for us to shall be used?
The only thing is I don't want to do a one size fits all because like a green roof only works if it's a flat roof. And if someone is coming in to build a one family house, I'm hesitant to have a shall. And again, depending on the entity that's coming in to build the house.
Okay.
I mean, there's some things that the solar powered lighting is easy to do, and that could be across the board.
Right, because I'm just hoping that we would be able to encourage people to do it as opposed to suggest that they do. You know what I mean? Because we're trying to get further and closer to more of a green infrastructure.
Right.
If it would make sense for us to just do that here or not.
I think I would prefer to be able to say something where, I think for the type of development that we see here, I think the biggest bang for the buck is to ensure heavy landscaping. And and again, the Energy Star appliances are huge for this type of housing, which we have. The facade fenestration,
So are they more like the shalls?
yeah, so let's split this up into shalls and shoulds, although I typically, and I would say that number 2, number 4, and number 5 are shalls. And the only reason, number 3,
What page are you?
oh, I'm in green building design, page,
Oh, there it is, I see it.
I'd like and we'll make solar powered lighting a shall.
Mm-hmm.
Is that solar powered exterior lighting?
Yeah.
And if I could add one level of complication to this,
Mm-hmm.
in the specified building products with recycled content that are manufactured regionally,
Mm-hmm.
we don't really say anything about levels of insulation, because that is the biggest impact that you can have on the energy efficiency of the building envelope. So I think like envelope design and needs to be mentioned somewhere, because that's really the biggest impact you can have on reducing energy consumption is through greater levels of building insulation, as well as solar orientation and shading of any large.
Right.
So I guess it's just like, maybe rather than nickel and diming it, is there a way that we could be more comprehensive about saying these methods are encouraged, but if you're going to use them, these are the ones? I don't know.
Well, the other thing, the shoulds have power, because if the city decides to enter into a redevelopers agreement, they're there as a basis. And so I definitely, want to keep those, but I can add language about insulation.
I would say building envelope design.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that would certainly help, as well as the shoulds and the other, or the shalls in the green building design that you've spoken about.
Yeah. And
that would help us, I think.
Then for the encouraged, I'm going to keep the solar panel, green roofs, stormwater recharging, and the recycled content. I'm going to do that.
I think these are small areas, right? Like you'd mentioned, that the lot sizes are small, because I'm concerned obviously about the stormwater recharging systems. But if these lots already are built upon.
Well, the thing is, some of these again are vacant 25 by 100s, and that's why that's only an encouraged, because we would only really impose stormwater recharging system if a larger scale development came in and it made sense, because actually a 1 and a 2 family are exempt from stormwater regs.
But if a larger developer comes in.
Well, that's why it would be the encouraged.
But if a larger, so I guess my question is, what scale is possible in a larger consolidated development? Because if it's only they could do townhomes on a larger assemblage.
Right. And if it's a larger assemblage, it's going to be before this board. Is
there a trigger that sends them here for a certain size?
Yes.
What is that?
3 family and up. So that's the other thing. This redevelopment plan was originally written as if everything was going to go to a land use board, and 1 and 2 family homes, if they don't trigger any variances, are exempt from land use board review.
Mhm.
So that's another reason we're fixing it the way we are.
Is it typical or possible to say lots over a certain size need to be reviewed by this board? Like, I'm not saying that this is possible, but what if somebody comes in and buys 10 of these 25 by 100 lots, and now you have a 25,000 square foot lot?
No, then that's considered but that's considered more than building a 1 or 2 family. But typically in New Jersey, unless it's for commercial property, you can't set your site plan review minimum as lot size. It has to, if it's for residential, it's per unit.
Okay. Because it gets to that concern about wide scale, like large scale development overwhelming.
Right, and I don't really think we're going to see that based upon the build out of the neighborhood. And mostly because, again, Springwood Avenue was removed out of this plan a while ago, and that's where the majority of the vacant lots are.
Okay. But back to the green building.
Mm-hmm.
We all set? Is there anything else from the planning board?
I have one more, just Jen, nitpicky thing, I'm sorry. But in the intro there, like back to the green building design, the last sentence, it just incorporate resource efficiency through green building design wherever feasible. This might seem
What
really.
page are you referring to? I'm sorry.
Page 13, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Is there a slightly different wording? I mean, just to say and resource efficiency and green building design?
Yes.
The only reason I say that, I know that, yeah, because the emphasis is on resource efficiency, but there's other reasons, obviously, to do green building design. So that would just open it up a little bit more.
Okay.
Because I know sometimes, yeah, I just think it broadens it a bit.
Done.
Thank you.
Anything else from the planning board members? Can I ask if our professionals have any concerns about what was presented? Is it consistent with the master plan? Any concerns from CCH?
Hi, it's Donna. Jack, do I need to be sworn?
Sure. Please raise your right hand. Solemnly swear testimony about giving this matter, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. State your name and affiliation with the board.
I do. Donna Miller, board planner. We're not going to make a finding. You guys are going to make a finding of consistency. But it's, I think that the type of changes that the city's done are right in line with the things that have come through in the master plan process. So, and I think the changes that Ms. Souter and Mr. Gallipo have recommended echo that.
Do we have any concerns? I don't think that Jason or Doug, I don't think that this hits your area, but I thought I'd ask anyway.
No comment.
Okay. Jack, is this something that is open for public
Yeah.
question?
Historically, we've allowed, it's a legislative type hearing, and we don't necessarily have to open it, but historically the board has. So I see no reason not to.
All right, can I get a motion to open to public questions?
So moved, Jim Henry.
Second.
Can anybody, if anybody would like to speak, please raise your hand either on your phone or on the Zoom, via Zoom.
I have 2 hands raised, and I'm going to call out the last 4 numbers of your phone number. The first person is last 4 numbers 5795. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, folks. Warren
lost him.
Warner.
I think he cut out.
Okay.
No, he's muted. Oh, there he's back.
It says I'm unmuted. Testing. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, great. I'm looking at the document that you're discussing, and specifically on page 12, where it discusses lighting, landscaping, and lighting objectives and requirements. Why is there no specification here for maximum lighting levels and color temperature? That would be very desirable. It only mentions a minimum, which opens the door to excess.
You know what we should do? Because we are adding lighting standards to the zoning ordinance, maybe we should add a number 11 that it must meet the standards in the zoning ordinance.
Possibility.
And I have to say, these are 1 and 2 family homes. The type of lighting that we see are off the rack things. And I feel as though, what the standards that you're talking about is more in scale for larger scale development and not for, a smaller home builder or for interfaith or habitat to demonstrate.
I would beg to disagree, because individual property owners or residents find it very easy to out to Home Depot or someplace and pick up a really inappropriate light and basically install it themselves. So creating
the standards in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, but currently we don't have a lighting ordinance. So I'm just concerned that if you adopt this, that there's no maximum and no color temperature restriction. And those are the 2 main issues.
We're very shortly going to have.
Okay.
Very shortly.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Warner. Okay, next person I have hand up is phone number. That was the only one. Okay, phone number ending in 3350. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, Ernest Nignoli, 400 Deal Lake Drive, Asbury Park, New Jersey, apartment 5D. So we're talking about I missed a little part of the first part. So I guess we're talking about an interface application about a 2-family on Springwood. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. We're here tonight talking about amendment to the STARS redevelopment plan area.
No, there's no application. In other words, you mentioned numerous and many times interface and something else, but that's not what's being applied. It's just basically I don't want to use the word manipulation, but maybe some changes of the plan. Is that it?
Yeah, I would use the word changes. Yes.
Okay, modifications, whatever. So I did. This is Mr. Alonso. I just wanted to clarify. You said a lot of your expertise comes from work that you did up in Jersey City, correct?
I'd say the part of my career, of course.
Yeah, well, I thought you said that the author of this and yourself worked on things in Jersey City.
Yes.
Okay. All right, because I just want to state that not only am I familiar with Asbury, but I own a lot of property in Jersey City, and I notice a trend that planners tend to kind of, I don't want to say fall into, but sort of the government of the municipality uses the planning and zoning to kind of put forth a plan which usually, in most cases, includes density, but in your case, you're talking about 1 and 2 families. However, the propensity of what you're doing is that you basically are taking what used to be people's yards.
I'm sorry, Mr. Magnoli. Do you have a question? This is question period, not comment.
Yeah. Are you combining what is actually yards into lots? Because
No, not combining yards. This is
isn't the undersized lots on the west side, at least when I go street to street, it looks like there's a lot of lots there, but they're actually in the original plan of the development of the west side, those were actually yards to single family homes.
Mr.
And now,
Mignoli, you
please,
testify.
please ask your question.
are these yards?
No, there's a minimum lot size.
I'm aware of that, but in other words, if someone bought a house and it had a yard, and now someone wants to come along and buys that lot from them, are you selling or allowing the city to then join those lots to whoever buys them and make building lots out of yards? That's the question.
No,
No.
we're not talking
So
about
where did all these under 25 foot by 100?
I didn't say they were under 25 foot. I said they were undersized for the city.
Okay, so why are they undersized? Is it because are they undersized because? Okay, go ahead.
The pattern of development for 3/4 of the city is a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. This neighborhood's development pattern is different, mostly because it was developed differently. And thus the lot sizes are smaller to coincide with the historic neighborhood pattern.
Okay, here's a question for you. These lots that you're talking about, there's nothing on them, correct? Most of them?
No, this is zoning for an area. So this is the area
okay.
where there
All
are
right, let me ask it
homes,
another
there are
way.
vacant lots.
Let me ask it another way. Is there a reason why these lots have sat vacant for 60 years?
I do not know what lots you're referring to.
It's way
That's a
beyond
question.
the testimony. Way beyond the scope.
What?
That's beyond the scope of her testimony.
Why is that? She's the planner.
It doesn't matter. You've asked her a question totally outside of what she was discussing.
Well, I don't know. I thought she was talking about lots that were undersized that were either joined or are going to be given exceptions
Not at
to
all.
build one family.
Not at all.
No?
No.
I didn't hear it correctly. Okay. Okay. So, will this plan basically be mostly populated by the developer interfaith?
No.
It can be anyone.
It could be anyone, and this neighborhood is built out. This neighborhood is built out with 1 and 2 family homes predominantly.
Okay. In other words, could the public buy a lot?
I didn't understand or hear your question.
In other words, could someone like myself or the public or someone from anywhere who wants to build a one family there in that where you're talking about, could they buy the lot, or is it going to be preferred to people you're used to working with, like an interfaith or something like that? In other words, is it open to the public what you're doing?
Yes, because we're not talking about a specific lot. We're talking about a neighborhood. There's no lots for sale that I know of. Not saying that there aren't, but this is not that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about acquiring parcels and selling parcels. This is a neighborhood redevelopment plan.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Why then are you talking about it if there's no applications? There's no lots, there's just lots.
Mr. Chairwoman, I move to end public comment.
You moved to what?
I move to close public comment.
Not public. He's asking her questions, but the questions are going way beyond what was discussed. It's got nothing to do with what she was discussing.
Well, okay, if that's the way
Talking
you
about
feel.
amendment to an existing redevelopment plan. It's not talking about.
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to ask questions about what's the city's motivation for doing this when it's considered. Okay. Oh,
The
look,
motivation is that
I know. My time is up. I could tell when you all don't want to get any more questions.
Okay, Mr. Magnoli,
Yeah.
I'm sorry I've
Mute him,
muted you. If you have another question related to Miss Alonso's testimony only, please ask it now.
No.
Okay,
No.
thank you very much. I don't show anyone else whose hand is raised.
All right, can I get a motion for public comment, please? To open public comment, 3 minutes.
Jim Henry, so moved.
Anyone
Sim
have?
Souter, second.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Irina.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second to get the clock up. And to the public, if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand or dial *9 on your telephone keypad. Okay, I have one person. Oh, 2 people. Okay, let's see. Okay, Warner, go ahead.
I need
Just
to
one
swear
sec
him in.
while I get the clock up.
I need to swear him in.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Greetings.
Hello,
Great.
Warner. How are you?
I'm
Warner,
raising my hand.
but please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Of course.
And please give us your name and your address in the city, please.
Warner Baumgartner, Fifth Avenue, Asbury Park, city historian.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What I've heard about this proposal is very encouraging. It basically brings the development standards more in line with the existing residential character that's over there. It appears to lower the density. It appears to address design issues, to make the buildings more compatible. There's some pretty horrible stuff that's gone on over there, which sticks out like a sore thumb, and hopefully this will curtail some of that. The lighting issue I already asked about. I think that should be addressed. I don't think we should wait for a lighting ordinance. I think it should be put specifically in this ordinance. It's a very simple matter to put in, not to exceed 2,700 Kelvin or 1 foot candle. Those are easy things to install and would give some teeth to the plan itself without waiting for larger design standards for lighting. So I would say this all sounds pretty good to me. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baumgartner.
Sure.
Okay, and next person is Mr. Magnoli. Go ahead.
Mr. Mignoli?
Let's swear you in first.
Mr. Mignoli, I can't see.
My right hand is raised.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Ernest Mignoli, 400 Deal Lake Drive, apartment 5D, Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Thank you.
So I tend to agree. I like, not just like, I think populating Asbury Park with one-family homes or two-family, but specifically one family, I think is the greatest thing that could ever happen to the city. I wish it would happen in other quadrants, but it seems to be specified over to on the west side, et cetera, et cetera. Another caller mentioned some things about there's been some horrible things that have gone on there and that this could compensate. And I can't agree more. I just wish that those things were never approved, because it's hard to uncompensate things that were approved many times against the neighborhood's approval. And I'll give an example. I don't know what that thing is that got approved on Memorial, that big couple of hundred condos with I don't know, it's like a city on the top with dog runs and forests and swimming pools and stuff. And it kind of, I remember listening to all the private homeowners saying, what are you putting next to us? We're one family homes here, but it got approved. So I tend to think that, and I don't mean this specifically about anybody on the board or anybody in the city, but I think the people who have the cherished one-family homes in this city are under siege from all sides with things that get respot zoned and somehow slipped in, and then they're there. I mean, look at Springwood and Memorial. Yeah, they're nice, affordable housing, but you got people living on Memorial Drive, eating their eggs for breakfast, and a 30,000-pound diesel truck comes right by 3 feet away. Now, I don't consider that really giving people affordable housing that's desirable. I mean, the soot that goes in their home. I mean, how is that really helping the neighborhood and the people there? So I think, from what I've seen, developers like Interfaith, these are precious, beautiful things, and they're ergonomic. and they take care of the details. And everybody who lives there likes what they do. I like what they do. I wish I could buy one of their homes. But that's not typical because other people have snuck in, other developers, and are putting in things that are I don't want to use the word pernicious, but they're not in keeping with the spirit of really making the West Side. In my opinion, it could be more beautiful with one-family homes than the East Side, where I live. Where I am is so dense. It's so dense, there's not even room for mosquitoes anymore. So, look, if the West Side is going to really, in earnest, do one families, God bless them, and thank you, and maybe I can buy one. I hope. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McNulty.
Anybody else, Irina?
I don't show anyone else.
Okay, can I get a motion to close public comment, please?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so we're all set for the, are we ready to make a motion to approve this to move forward?
I'll need comments, whatever the comments of the board are, with the references to the changes you'd like to pass on to the mayor and council. I'll need to get them.
Okay, well, we have, I think that Michelle, you probably have those that are, that have to do with the green modifications that we spoke about.
I could go through all the changes requested. The first one was for section D to add back the word some. And then to add the word of the language that Jen had spoken about, add the words the physical environment in the first section of goals. Then to divide up the green standards as shoulds and shalls, which shalls being 2, 4, 5, and also to add language of a minimum amount of building insulation. And then, turning my page, I'm sorry, about building envelope design. Encouraged shall be solar panels, green roofs, stormwater recharge system. And then we're going to change the language. We're going to add the word and after resource efficiency. So it'll be resource efficiency and green building design wherever feasible. And then I'm going to add to the lighting standards that lighting must meet the zoning standards for lighting in chapter 30. Is there anything I missed?
More here. I agree with Warner. Like there should be a max on the lightage. You say something's going to happen soon. I've been told for the past 3 years something's going to happen soon, and it hasn't happened. I'm not talking about this project. Give me a definition of soon. When and what are you talking about?
For August 12th, the lighting standards are going to council to be referred to the planning board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, you have everything you need there, Jack?
Well, I'm going to ask Michelle, since she wrote them down and she was reading from them, can you send me an email with those?
Yes, I'll type it
I
up.
couldn't write as fast as you were talking.
No, well, they're my handwritten notes next to me, but I'll type them up and send them to you.
Yeah, just send me an email, whatever.
Jen, were you
Thank you.
waving? Oh, never mind. I thought Jen was waving. She's petting. Okay.
Are you okay, John?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion to approve the updates to the STARS redevelopment plan amendment?
Jen Souter, I'll make a motion.
I'll second it, Mike Manzella.
You're muted, Irina.
Sorry. I have a motion by Jennifer Sauter and a second by Michael Manzella. Mayor John Moore,
No.
Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton,
Yes.
Michael Manzella,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
Jennifer Sauter,
Yes.
Alexis Taylor,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo,
Yes.
Rick Lambert,
He's muted.
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Rick. And Barbara Krisak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Amendments approved.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the AP Triangle. There are two applications for the AP Triangle LLC that have come back to the board. At this time, I'm going to recuse myself and turn the meeting over to Rick Lambert as the acting chair.
Hi, I apologize that you can't see me. I had technical difficulties, so I'm on my phone. At the last meeting, the major concern was the stormwater management, and I think you've seen in our packets that a letter from Ms. Porter saying that the engineering firm has made some changes to the stormwater management plan to kind of address our concerns. And so I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Porter, and she can elaborate.
Great. So good evening, board members. Jennifer Porter for the applicant AP Triangle. As the chairman indicated, AP Triangle last appeared in front of the board approximately 2 weeks ago. At that meeting, we had completed all of our remaining testimony concerning the site plan application with testimony from our landscape architect as well as from our planner. And then we went on to address our DEP Kafra compliance letter and stormwater issues. And after lengthy discussion, where we left off is that we had agreed to meet with the board engineer to continue discussing that issue and to table further discussion until this evening. So as was our position during the last meeting, we continue to maintain that AP Triangle's stormwater obligation as a subsequent developer in the waterfront redevelopment area is to demonstrate compliance to DEP's satisfaction that the applicant has met the threshold criteria set forth under the Kafra permit issued for the waterfront redevelopment area. Now, the Kafra permit works in conjunction with the master developer's stormwater obligations, which are set forth under the master redeveloper agreement and the infrastructure component report. And together, those three documents control stormwater obligations and compliance in the waterfront redevelopment area. It is our position that to impose any further obligations upon AP Triangle as a subsequent developer would run contrary to the intent of those agreements and does not have a basis in law. We asked the board, why would the master developer, and you'll hear this through our testimony this evening, invest $24 million to date into the public infrastructure to be placed within the waterfront redevelopment area without any legal, contractual, or regulatory framework that expressly defines the parameters under which the stormwater system, sanitary sewer system, and the like shall be developed, implemented, and operated? The answer is they would not, which is why the legal, contractual, and regulatory framework is in place and governs the implementation of any and all stormwater measures in the waterfront redevelopment area. Now, it would be arbitrary for the board to impose stormwater measures upon a subsequent developer here when the stormwater obligations between the city and the master developer for the waterfront redevelopment area have already been defined, and as you'll hear through our testimony this evening, to a major extent, have already been implemented in good faith by the master developer in reliance on those contractual and legal obligations. This is not a traditional site plan application under the municipal land use law. This is an application that's governed by the waterfront redevelopment plan, which expressly states that it supersedes all underlying zoning. This is also an application by a subsequent developer, not the master developer, that received prior approval from City Council, the local redevelopment authority, and which is required by law to enter into a redevelopment agreement with both the master developer and the city, and whose legal requirement is to demonstrate compliance with the Kafra permit, and whose only other obligation is to connect to the existing storm system that has already been put into place by the master developer in this area. In fact, this board recognized the distinction between a master developer and the subsequent developer's obligations very recently, just a few months ago, when it removed stormwater improvements for the applicant at 215 First Avenue, same situation, who just like AP Triangle is a subsequent developer in the Waterfront redevelopment area. That applicant came back to the board on the basis that it, not being the master developer, was not obligated to put forth those stormwater improvements, and the board removed those requirements from that application. In order for the board to better understand the existing framework for addressing stormwater improvements, we have brought with us this evening the civil engineer, Bob Curley, who has been intricately involved in the development of the Waterfront redevelopment area on behalf of the master developer. Mr. Curley was involved in the application. He's been here since the inception with respect to the Waterfront redevelopment area. He was involved in the original application for the Kafra permit back in 2004 and all amendments to it. And he's been involved in the creation and implementation of all of the stormwater infrastructure improvements that are set forth under the infrastructure component report. And he's familiar with the waterfront redevelopment agreements and associated amendments which govern stormwater compliance in the waterfront redevelopment plan. He will provide engineering testimony on the existing permitting agreements and procedure in place for addressing those stormwater issues in the WRA. Now, please note that the applicant did submit revised plans showing additional piping in the stormwater retention basin at the site, but we believe that these improvements are not legally required, as you will hear through our testimony by Mr. Curley. Moreover, in order to implement those measures, we would need to remove the public path from the site plan to allow adequate room for the basin, which goes against prior comments from this board and recommendations from the TRC and City Council. So we strongly believe that this project will be a valuable contribution to the waterfront redevelopment area. We just don't think it's fair that it's unlawful for the board to impose additional development constraints that have been addressed or will be addressed by the master developer or are the responsibility of others to address. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to Mr. Curley to have his testimony if the board wants to swear him in. Mr. Curley? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Hello, Rick? Rick?
I'm here, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay. Okay to swear in Mr. Curley?
Yes, please.
Okay. Bob, please raise your right hand.
And can everyone hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name for the record and your profession.
My name is Robert Curley. I'm a licensed professional engineer and I work for Mazer Consulting, and I've been working with the master developer since the beginning of the project.
Thank you.
I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey.
Yeah, Mr. Curley's appeared before the planning board on a couple of dozen occasions in the last 20 years, so I suggest we don't need to check his qualifications.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so Mr. Curley, are you familiar with Asbury Park's waterfront redevelopment plan and its requirements?
Yes, I also assisted with the drafting of the waterfront redevelopment plan prior to its approval.
And you just recently indicated that you've been involved as a civil engineer in the redevelopment of the waterfront redevelopment area from the inception of its design?
That's correct.
Okay, and what has your role been with respect to the redevelopment of property within the waterfront redevelopment plan, specifically in the context of your representation of the master developer?
I've worked with the master developer in not only preparing the engineering plans that ultimately were constructed for the entire waterfront redevelopment, stormwater management, but also worked with the master developer in developing some individual sites throughout the waterfront redevelopment: the Vive, Monroe Condos, South Grand, the Asbury Lanes, those projects.
Okay, and can you cite your specific experience in dealing with stormwater improvements or infrastructure in connection with the master developer and the city?
With the original application that ultimately was submitted to the DEP, I worked with the city and the master developer to obtain the regional Kafra permit for the waterfront redevelopment area. In addition to that, we obtained a master treatment works approval permit for the sanitary sewer improvements within the waterfront redevelopment area, and also assisted New Jersey American Water Company with the Bureau of Safe Drinking Water permit that covered the waterfront redevelopment plan prior to them obtaining a master permit.
Okay, so now let's move specifically to master developer obligations within the waterfront redevelopment area. So let's discuss the roles of the master developer in the city for stormwater improvements and infrastructure within the WRA. So one at a time, beginning with the first one, what are the 3 critical documents that govern stormwater improvements and infrastructure within the waterfront redevelopment area?
So the primary governing document would be the Kafra Permit. And within the Kafra Permit, it references the infrastructure component report and also the master developer agreement. All of those 3 documents make up the approval that was obtained for the waterfront redevelopment area.
And those three documents working together define the stormwater obligations with respect to master developer within the waterfront redevelopment area.
That's correct.
If I may, can you reiterate a document? One was Kafra Permit. What were the other 2 you were referring to?
The infrastructure component report.
Okay.
And the amended and reinstated redeveloper and land deposition agreement.
Thank you.
I indicated it as the master developer agreement.
Okay, thanks.
So can you explain what the infrastructure component report is?
So during the Kafra review process, it was obvious that there was the need to define the obligations of the master developer with regard to the approvals for the waterfront redevelopment area.
For the entire area?
That's correct.
Okay.
And also that there would be a commitment to constructing those improvements. I worked with the city and the master developer to identify and define the reconstruction and rehabilitation items and the general phasing of the waterfront redevelopment plan, and completed the infrastructure component report, which identifies those improvements that were to be constructed for the entire build out of the waterfront.
Okay, now we'll get into what improvements have been made or are to be made, but can you also address what specifically is set forth under the master developer agreement between the city and iStar in terms of its obligations?
So in the master development agreement, it identifies, or the amended, reinstated, redeveloper and land deposition agreement. It specifies scheduling, phasing, cleaning up of derelict buildings. It also identifies the master developer's obligations and also the city's obligations to effectuate the waterfront redevelopment plan that was ultimately approved by the city.
Okay, and what does the Kafra permit do in the context of working with these 2 other agreements?
The Kafra approval, and which I'm sure the board understands, but that was a approximately 2-year process of working with the DEP and also the public, because there was public comment that was worked through with the ultimate approval of the Kafra permit. It identifies all of the individual criteria within the redevelopment plan, within the Kafra regulations, and how this permit is in compliance with those regulations. So it goes through and identifies each individual section and identifies how the waterfront redevelopment plan, with the ultimate build out of 3,164 units and 450,000 square feet of commercial area, was in compliance and still is in compliance with the Kafra approval.
And what are the specific parameters that the DEP defined under the Kafra permit, which serve as the basis in terms of allowable development or development constraints in connection with improvements or redevelopment within the WRA?
So there's 2 design criteria that are looked at, and one is the quantity of dwellings that would be approved on an individual block, which is specifically called out in the waterfront redevelopment plan. And also there's maximum impervious coverages. And those maximum impervious coverages are defined within the Kafra approval and were updated with the center designation that the city ultimately approved. which allowed for 90% impervious coverage.
Okay, do you know the total number of dwellings that were approved under the Kafra permit for allowable construction within the waterfront redevelopment area?
The allowable total build out for the waterfront redevelopment plan that was approved by the DEP was 3,164 dwelling units.
And at this point in time, are you aware of, or do you know whether the master developer has reached or is near reaching the development of 3,000 units?
It's probably less than half.
Okay.
And ultimately obtaining 3,164 dwelling units based upon the current developed lots is going to be very, very difficult, if at all possible.
So it's your testimony that the parameters that form the basis for the Kafra permit issuance set forth and allowed for and considered the impact of the potential development of over 3,000 dwelling units within the waterfront redevelopment area?
That was what was approved by the DEP. That's correct.
And for stormwater improvements to be done in connection with the issuance of the Kafra permit, that consideration based upon that level of development and that level of impervious coverage were built into the stormwater improvements that were imposed as obligations on the master developer. Is that correct?
The design of the stormwater system was designed with the idea that the entire waterfront redevelopment area would be designed at 90% impervious coverage.
Okay. So let's talk about the Kafra permit and DEP and get into that process a little bit further. So what is the application process for a subsequent developer or a developer within the waterfront redevelopment area?
The process is defined in the waterfront redevelopment plan on page 67, and also is further identified in the amended and reinstated redevelopers and land disposition agreement, article 11.3, which identifies the submission requirements that would go to the first technical review committee, and then to the redevelopment agency, and then finally to the planning board. The technical review committee, it was understood that in an effort to ensure that the development process wouldn't get stalled, needed to include a number of different people. And the article 11.3 identifies that the 8-member board should consist of the council person that is assigned to the planning board chairman, a licensed architect, a member from the DEP, and a member from the New Jersey Department of Consumer Affairs, a professional planner, professional engineer, and a master developer designee. So those 8 members were to evaluate the applications that got put before them to understand consistency with not only the Kafra approval, but with the waterfront redevelopment plan, and to make sure that those standards were adhered to prior to referring an application to the redevelopment authority for their consideration, and then potentially on to the planning board.
Okay, so is there currently a member of TRC that's a representative or member of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection?
Well, so in that vein, when applications are prepared and submitted to the technical review committee, at least all the applications that I've been involved with, let me step back. Your question was, is there a member from the DEP on the TRC?
Right.
And over the past few years, no, there have not been a representative designee on the technical review committee.
Okay, so what is the substitute process that has been implemented as a result of the fact that DEP has not attended a TRC meeting for several years?
So when an application is being prepared for the technical review committee, a copy of that application together with all of the development plans, including architecturals, are submitted to the DEP with a request for their review and compliance with the Kafra approval.
Okay. And then what specific analysis is then undertaken by DEP to determine stormwater compliance?
So the DEP looks at the plans as submitted and compares it to the original CAFR approval. And if they have comments, they would come back and either ask for additional information or clarifications, or identify areas that the application would not be in compliance with the CAFR approval.
Okay, and you mentioned previously that one of the factors that they look to, one of the parameters is in set controls is to allow for 90% impervious coverage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in terms of that specific requirement, why, in your professional opinion, would it be inappropriate to utilize existing site conditions as a means of comparison or analysis in connection with determining stormwater compliance?
Okay, so there's a couple of answers to that question. So one of the requirements that is defined in the amended and reinstated redevelopers and land disposition agreement is that portions of the properties that existed when this original agreement was completed were in derelict condition and needed to be removed.
And did the master developer fulfill its obligation with respect to removing those blighted properties by returning them to their natural state?
Returning them to a
state.
stabilized, a stabilized condition, yes.
Okay.
Which would be a grass, in some instances, it's grassed fields. Other instances, there's temporary parking lots that have been installed. But yes, the current conditions, so getting back to your original question, the current conditions for a good portion of the waterfront redevelopment area are grassed properties. A comparison from pre to post development in utilizing a grassed field to an impervious surface puts a burden on any subsequent developer to reduce flows to existing conditions. And that's an unfair burden based upon the amended and reinstated redeveloper and land disposition agreement, mandating that those areas or those buildings and those impervious surfaces be removed because they were derelict in their condition at that time. So back to
okay, go ahead, continue.
Back to your original question of how does the DEP look at compliance? Again, they would look at the stormwater management measures that have been put in place to date and constructed and ensure that it was in compliance with the original CAFR approval. Look at the quantity of dwelling units that were proposed for the particular block development or area of development and ensure that it met the waterfront redevelopment plan and the CAFR approval that was originally issued.
Okay. And what was DEP's determination with respect to the AP Triangle site in connection with this project?
They issued a compliance letter.
And what was DEP's specific determination with respect to stormwater compliance as it relates to discharge?
Excuse me, again, they issued a compliance letter for the project.
Okay. So let's move on to stormwater improvements that have been performed previously and are still, under obligation to be performed. So could you please address all stormwater improvements that have occurred by the master developer within the waterfront redevelopment area?
So I know I touched on this before, but part of the waterfront redevelopment overall stormwater management system, and one of the main reasons why the DEP was so encouraged for this redevelopment was the fact that the existing storm sewer system that existed prior to any reconstruction had absolutely no water quality measures at all, had open catch basins with no best management practices or smaller orifices to block garbage from going into not only the lakes, but ultimately the ocean, and had direct discharges from the storm sewer system directly into the ocean without going into Wesley Lake. So the master developer and we had prepared a stormwater management plan that included water quality treatment devices throughout the waterfront redevelopment zone to pick up all of the water within the waterfront redevelopment zone, with the exception of some small areas that are immediately adjacent to the lakes. To your question of what has been constructed to date, all of the stormwater improvements on Cookman Avenue, Grand Avenue, Heck Street, St. James Place, Lake Avenue, Wesley Lake Drive, Asbury Avenue, Ocean Avenue, Kingsley Street, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, and Sunset Avenue. All of those improvements on those streets have been completed in conjunction with the original designs that were approved by the DEP.
And you indicated Cookman Avenue, Heck Street, and Asbury Avenue, the 3 streets that form the perimeter of the subject application. Those have all been part of those improvements that have been completely constructed at this point.
That's correct.
Okay. And can you address all stormwater improvements that will continue to occur within the waterfront redevelopment area?
So yes, there's still some improvements that need to be completed, and those are largely west of Kingsley Street, and in between Kingsley and Berg Street, improvements on 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, and 3rd Avenues are partially completed as of right now. So those areas need to be finalized, together with areas between Kingsley Street and Webb Street on 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, and 8th Avenues. Those improvements also need to be completed. And then there's improvements that would need to be finalized on Deal Lake Drive. And those would be the last water quality units that would be installed, which would be on Deal Lake Drive.
Okay, and what are the timeframes within which the stormwater improvements have been or will be constructed? Is that in accordance with any specific criteria in any agreement?
It was based upon a block by block development schedule or phasing, and there was a overall phasing map that was included as part of the infrastructure component report, identifying individual phases, and it didn't specify timing, but it identified what would occur 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and it was based upon block development within the waterfront redevelopment area.
Okay, and in terms of this specific site as it relates to that plan, it was included in connection with part of the phase 1 improvements that were constructed?
That's correct.
Okay.
So that was one of the first things that were completed.
Okay, that have been completed. Okay.
That's correct.
So what are the stormwater improvements that are to be made concerning runoff? What is the specific obligation of a subsequent developer regarding runoff from site discharges as it relates to the master developer and city with respect to considerations for the site?
The obligation would be to, if a proposed development would include new paved surfaces, those paved surfaces would need to provide water quality before entering into the stormwater management system. Otherwise, it would be just to connect to the existing storm sewer system, and those flows would be discharged in the lake. Or
And that's because all other stormwater improvements are already being addressed or have been addressed by master developer pursuant to the other agreements we spoke about or permit requirements.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's address the flooding issue. What is the best way to address a flooding issue now or in the future in the context of the waterfront redevelopment area?
I guess the flooding area or the flooding issues that we're talking about that are associated with this application have to do with Wesley Lake. And the reason for the flooding that occurs on Wesley Lake is due to a undersized outfall pipe and a reconfiguration of the outlet structure would be needed to eliminate the flooding concerns.
So it's not the result of an issue with respect to the water coming from sites, but a result of the existing infrastructure in place at the lake.
That's correct.
Okay. So with respect to the flooding at Wesley Lake, in terms of the configuration, you know, in terms of the overall obligation, what is the role with respect to a subsequent developer with regard to addressing that specific issue in the context of the overall stormwater compliance?
Well, again, when the application is made to the TRC, a simultaneous application would be submitted to the DEP, and their review would be for compliance with the original Kafra approval. And the intent is to have the DEP compliance letter issued either concurrently with the planning board approval or have it even before the planning board approval. That's the idea.
Okay, and when DEP issues its letter, I understand that it's subject to a set amount of parameters that we discussed in terms of impervious coverage, number of units, but is DEP's review limited in terms of compliance with those criteria, or does DEP also look to current stormwater regulations in connection with its review of an application?
They look at all current regulations.
And in doing so, did DEP find the need here for there to be any additional stormwater improvements to be imposed in connection with the development of this site?
It was not referenced in their approval letter, no. So,
okay, so
no.
And would DEP have the right to incorporate that into their letter?
They have commented on previous applications in that regard, so yes, they would.
Okay, so past practice has been that to the extent that they required it, they either issued comments or they set forth additional conditions in their letter of compliance.
That's correct.
And that was not done in connection with this application.
That's correct.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. I appreciate you coming in, giving a presentation for the board. It was very, very educational. Excuse me. So I'll open up the questions to board members.
Jim Henry, I have a couple of questions from Mr. Curley. Mr. Curley, you were involved with the design of the stormwater system that affects the lot in question, correct?
No, I was not.
You were not involved with the original design of the stormwater system that was installed?
You said with this application.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I'm not referring to this application. I'm referring to this,
Yes.
this property location.
So to answer, yes, with all the infrastructure for all of the waterfront redevelopment, yes, I've been involved since the beginning.
Okay.
Stormwater management system.
And that was installed, that system was installed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Lake Avenue still floods, correct?
It definitely floods on occasion, yes.
Okay. And that's in spite of the new system that was designed to alleviate that flooding, correct?
That's incorrect. No, the reason why Lake Avenue floods is because the water cannot leave the lake because there is an undersized outfall pipe at the lake exit.
Is that true? Is that true under every time it floods, Mr. Curley?
Yes, the outfall pipe is undersized.
No, that's not my question. My question is every time it floods because that outflow pipe is undersized, and only because it's undersized?
The outfall pipe and the outlet structure, the weir length, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and that's the only reason it floods?
That's correct.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
And you've never seen it flood when the outflow pipe was not full?
I have not, no.
No?
I've been around on numerous storm events and not seen the roadway flooded and the lake not flooded. It's the lake's backing up onto the street.
Well, that's kind of pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, the roadway certainly wouldn't flood if the lake wasn't flooded. And you're saying that the only time you've ever seen the lake flooded is when the outflow pipe is full and backing up over the weir?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are you aware that they're proposing to add another over 50,000 cubic feet of water to the lake as from the site that we're talking about?
So,
Well, how does this relate to our specific application in terms of the lakes?
The initial design of the stormwater system took into account that 90% of the lot that you're talking about is going to be impervious cover. And I'm saying that with your new, with the system the way it is now, and the lot the way it is now, it still floods. It floods fairly often. Is that correct, Mr. Curley?
I don't know about frequency, but it definitely floods.
Okay.
Right, but
And
you,
that-
Mr.
It
Curley.
floods now, even though the lot is grass.
That's correct.
Okay, and now that lot is going to become 90% impervious, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so in the conditions that it is now versus the condition after the improvements are made, you're going to have an awful lot more runoff from that site, correct?
Okay, so if we're going to talk about a specific site, and we're going to talk about this, the drainage area that is associated with the lake is approximately 800 acres.
Yeah.
And the time it takes for the peak water to reach that lake is in excess or very close to 2 hours.
Okay.
The water generated by this site will enter the lake and leave the lake prior to that peak flow.
That's correct. And this site that we're talking about is grass, correct?
That's correct.
And the water that runs off that site goes into the system that was implemented as part of the Waterfront Redevelopment infrastructure package, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And now you're going to have this site become 90% pervious cover, correct? Impervious cover, I'm sorry.
Correct.
Okay. So now you're going to get quite a bit additional runoff from this site as compared to the condition it's in right now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're going to put over 50,000 cubic feet into Wesley Lake from this site, correct?
I'm not, again, I didn't do the design of the
Okay,
stormwater
I'm sorry.
management system for this site.
I represent.
But to your point, yes, there's going to be more runoff getting to the lake. That's correct.
Okay, and that's going to make the flooding of that Lake Avenue more common and more frequent, correct?
I'm going to disagree with you, no.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to disagree with you, no.
It's not going to be.
That is not the reason. The reason is not that the overall drainage basin causes the outfall pipe to be overwhelmed, and that's what backs up the water. It's not this development site backing up the water at
No,
the
that wasn't my question. My question is, isn't this going to increase the frequency of the flooding and the quantity of the flooding?
He already answered that question.
Again, I'm going to say no. And I'm saying no because of the same reason that I had mentioned to you before. about the time of concentration that's associated with this particular project is so much shorter than the overall time of concentration for the drainage basin, that the water enters the lake and leaves the lake before the peak flow hits the lake.
Mr. Curley, this is Rick Lambert. I have a question. So the undersized outflow pipe, is that the city's responsibility to correct that? Is that an issue that the city has to resolve? The undersized outflow pipe to function better?
In my opinion, yes, it is a city obligation.
Okay, so it was not part of the infrastructure improvements that were done in the Waterfront redevelopment. This is a separate issue that is the city's concern that needs to be corrected from the city to alleviate this flooding issue.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
John Moore, I just got to add something. I say partially correct. I also believe it's the Army Corps of Engineer. I also believe it's DEP. Those are the two that built this small outfall pipe. It was too small when they built it. They built it, not the city. So as much as, okay, the city's trying to get out of this or trying to fix it, don't leave out the Army Corps of Engineer that screwed it up and DEP that screwed it up by putting in as too small of a pipe.
This is Rick Lambert again. So because of the size of this undersized outflow pipe, any future development there's going to continue to be flooding because the city's infrastructure can't accommodate what's occurring. And it's not the particular developments are not increasing it because the infrastructure built was designed, the infrastructure from the waterfront in the Waterfront redevelopment area was designed and implemented to accommodate all this proposed development. If the outflow pipe were the correct size, this flooding issue would be a moot point because the infrastructure would be able to accommodate it and it would flow out like it was supposed to into Wesley Lake. Is that basically correct?
That's correct.
So it seems like it's an issue the city needs to really get a handle on to resolve this as future development is going to continue. We can't keep beating applicants for something that the city has to resolve.
I ask a question just distinguishing between kind of cumulative impact and direct impact. So it seems to me like what we're talking a lot about is cumulative and who's responsible for those cumulative impacts. But if we're asking as part of a plan, or development proposal that they treat the direct impact of stormwater on site, having nothing to do with cumulative impacts. It doesn't matter where it goes. It doesn't matter if it goes to Wesley Lake and the city is responsible for that or anything else. I think that the board would need some other document that, if you're saying there are these other documents besides the Kafra permit, there's an infrastructure document, there's something that says that all of these other things will be dealt with, then don't we also need to review that as part of it? Because it's the same thing with parking. You can't just say, well, someone else is taking care of the parking. You have to produce a parking agreement.
This is Rick.
Direct impacts.
This is Rick Lambert. Wouldn't these issues have been addressed with the redevelopment agency and the TRC? All of these things would have already been approved and resolved.
Exactly. It's entirely within their purview and had been resolved, which is why the specific parameters which have been implemented were put into place.
But it's also within the planning board's purview to see if there's a direct negative impact that is directly caused by I'm serious, like not the whole cumulative thing. How do we do a one-to-one? You're contributing this much and therefore, and I think Jack brought it up last time, then therefore, there's this other document that we refer to that is mitigating that impact. We need some kind of one-to-one mitigation, or otherwise it's a negative impact.
Actually, no, because when you look at it in the context of all the other obligations which have been imposed on the developer, it can be construed as a double dip or a penalty against the master developer, because you're taking obligations under other agreements and imposing it upon a subsequent developer, someone who is not a party to those agreements, and thereby taking
I
away
totally-
from the intent of those
I
agreements.
follow that argument, but we're not reviewing the redevelopment agreement right now. So if we're just looking at just the application before us, which is all that we've been asked to do, and we see that there's a direct impact from this, then I'm actually asking, like, how do we approve something when we don't have any other document? And I know you guys have characterized the position of DEP, which I also think is a little bit problematic because they're not testifying here. And I don't know that they would want their position to be characterized that way, but how do we do that one-to-one direct impact?
I would be happy to read into the record the exact language set forth in the DEP compliance letter. I can read the entire letter from start to finish to the board, and we can see whether or not the document speaks for itself in terms of compliance.
Impact. How does the board consider that? How do we consider a direct impact? It's just a one-to-one. It's not cumulative. It's direct.
Right. The answer is you don't, because it's already been addressed in the context of these other agreements. And that's the point that the applicant is trying to make, that stormwater as a whole in this specific waterfront redevelopment area has previously, or is been addressed, or is ongoing through various other agreements and permits which are in place that impose legal, contractual, and regulatory requirements for stormwater compliance within this specific area. You're not dealing with a regular site plan application where what you're saying makes perfect sense, and you do those one-to-one comparisons and you look at all these things. You're looking at a specific area which has very defined criteria. You have significant investment that's been made over time in reliance upon those legal and statutory obligations. So that's why it becomes problematic when the board undertakes to impose further restrictions, when the developer or the master developer has invested a significant amount of time, effort, and money to put infrastructure in place that was specifically designed to go to the lake.
Okay.
But because, as you heard through our testimony, the lake is the issue, we're further being penalized and must do more so that we don't contribute anymore to the lake.
I guess just
May I interject for a second? Excuse my interruption.
Yep.
Bob, you mentioned something where you felt that the runoff from this site is not a negative impact on the lake, correct?
That's correct.
Why don't you state why? Maybe that would answer Alexa's question.
So this site is unique because it is so close to the lake. And if you think about the overall drainage basin being 800 acres, and it's probably more than 2 miles for the farthest raindrop that hits the drainage basin to where it goes out the discharge, and the time it takes for that first raindrop to get to the lake, which would be the maximum amount of flooding that could potentially occur. Our site, which is probably, it's something in excess of 2 hours. That's how long the water takes to get to the lake. Our water from this particular site hits the site, gets through the pipes within about 15 to 18 minutes. So therefore, the water is in the lake and going out the outfall pipe before the main amount of water gets to the lake.
This is Jen Souter. I have a quick question that I wanted to actually ask last time, and I was always having just trouble getting on. So my question is, and I do understand all the testimony from last meeting and this meeting regarding the location of the site and what you just explained. But knowing that, and I also understand the legal arguments that are being made, I think to the extent that my, non-legal mind can. But understanding like that best practices that there are green infrastructure strategies that can reduce the amount of water period from the site that could be implemented. And I know that's part of what came in this proposal, this last round of exhibits. Why wouldn't the applicant want to reduce the overall quantity from this site? Because using green infrastructure that could, roots of plants are taking up and actually reducing the amount overall I understand there might be a problem if you're slowing it and then the water from 2 miles away is catching up, so then it's not on its way. But understanding that on a site-by-site basis, you can reduce the overall amount of water that is getting to Wesley Lake through green infrastructure. Why wouldn't that be beneficial overall, both to the master redeveloper and this particular application? Because you're just reducing that quantity overall by using plant systems that will reduce that net overall.
The opportunities for the green infrastructure with the impervious coverage, allowable intensity development are going to be limited, very limited, for a project like this, and for other future projects that would pretty much allow building development almost to the property line.
Limited because of the, you're not saying from an engineering standpoint, you're saying limited because of the agreement in place.
The allowable development intensity, that's correct.
Right, right, so I guess, yeah, I understand we're going in a circle, but if understanding that that could help reduce the problem overall, and knowing that there's best practices from an engineering standpoint that could address that. We're just saying, because if you're meeting the requirement, I mean, I understand the argument that Jennifer's making. If you're meeting the obligation, why go above and beyond because the master developer's already done these other things that should address it? Even though we know that there is a possibility to reduce that quantity through other measures.
But the problem with the flooding, again, is the outfall pipe. It's not an individual site's drainage.
But am I not understanding it? I mean, rationally, that if you reduce the quantity on sites throughout the waterfront, you're going to be reducing that quantity, period. But reducing it meaning that, yes, you might still have that problem to some degree, but it's improving that issue if you're reducing it on a site-by-site basis by quantity.
So I'm sorry, and don't be mad at me. I'm gonna flip the coin to the other side. The ocean, you can't raise the level of the ocean. If we had a free discharge or an unobstructed outfall of that lake, we wouldn't be talking about flooding problems at all. So to your point, I'm not going to say that trying to promote groundwater recharge is not a good thing. Yes, it is a good thing. But the problem is a free discharge to the ocean. And again, you can't raise the level of the ocean. So it's not like we're causing flooding in the ocean.
This is Mike Manzel. I have a question. Mr. Curley, you said you were involved with the stormwater design for the original Kafra permit. Was this issue discussed when you know the overall design of the stormwater system for the overall development was planned? I mean, was it something that was identified as an issue?
The outfall pipe was never discussed for the lake, no.
Okay.
Donna needs to unmute herself.
Oh. I was just going to ask a follow-up question of Jason. So, Jason, I mean, I think we're simplifying kind of the whole like stormwater process, but is that characterization correct that even if you get to the lake faster, but there is some, right? If it were going directly to the ocean, yes, but essentially this water is getting there first. But aren't there tail conditions that would also lead to a delay? It still accumulates. I mean, is it true that it has zero impact?
Get him under oath. Jason, thank you. You solemnly swear testimony about giving this matter, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please tell the board your name and your affiliation with the board.
Jason Fitchter, Board Engineer.
Thank you.
So to Bob's point, there is some logic there. I don't know, the cumulative effect is the issue. You know, it seems to me that each site should do as much as it can to reduce the amount of water going to the lake. Slow it down.
Right, but isn't this site already meeting its obligation by virtue of contribution to the special assessment program in terms of the overall stormwater improvements which are to be made in the waterfront redevelopment area? So then to
How do we judge
pile
that?
this on top of that is another layer.
Answer the
But
question.
how do we judge that? If it's,
So my read of I'm sorry, Mayor Reese.
No, answer. Why don't you answer the question, Jason?
So my read of all the documents that you guys have been talking about, I've been reviewing those, you know, over the course of the past week. Everything in those documents seems to talk about water quality, which I think everybody here agrees we have addressed. And Sean Delaney went into great detail on our questioning last time. So I think water quality is good. Those documents also talk a lot about conveyance, and that's really the bulk of what I'm reading in the infrastructure component report and the Kafra approval and all that. It's about the conveyance. And Bob earlier went through the stormwater infrastructure that has been installed already, and that's about conveyance. There's not much in these documents that talks about quantity control, which is the issue we're talking about here, that is a contributor to. I wholeheartedly agree with Bob that the overall problem, the outlet structure to the lake, you have a weir wall and you have a pipe out to the ocean. Both of them need to be addressed to correct that situation. But the amount of runoff that comes from each site is definitely a contributor. And this is one of the things we deal with as engineers. Drainage areas are typically very large relative to an individual site. So, pardon the expression, but the best expression I can come up with to describe it is it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's dramatic, but it makes the point. You know, when this site is built, if there's no quantity control that's done, are people going to see a difference at the lake and in Lake Avenue? Maybe, maybe not. But when the waterfront redevelopment area as a whole is fully developed to its maximum potential, the cumulative effect is going to be noticeable. So everything I see addresses quality and conveyance, but not much about quantity. I do see mentions in some of those documents about basically saying there is a flooding issue and a quantity issue. I think it's the infrastructure component report puts out all these ideas to reduce the burden on the public infrastructures, things such as permeable pavement, bioswales, cisterns from, you know, roof discharge and those kind of things. Those are all steps that the city is trying to encourage be used for the sake of reducing the burden on the public infrastructure and the lake.
Right, so couldn't all of those controls be agreed upon in connection with the master developer in terms of, you know, remaining obligations with respect to the undevelopable land?
Doesn't this reduce
as opposed to imposing that obligation on a subsequent developer?
But doesn't this subsequent development reduce the total amount of land which that obligation is distributed over for the master developer? And what's to stop the next small development from saying, oh, we don't have to do anything, we're going to push that up to the master developer, and the next one and the next one, until the obligation of the master developer is so large or so small, I don't know which way you would call that we're like, oh, it's all developed and the lake floods.
So, but then what gives the board the right to arbitrarily choose who and who does not have to comply? So why did the board remove the stormwater improvement requirements in connection with the TRIP site, which was another subsequent developer for another number of units? Why would the board act inconsistently in its own position?
Let's take this in sequence. First of all, I disagree with your original proposition on the law. I still feel that under the MLU on local ordinances and this Kafra permit that you discussed, right to the point of what Jason just brought out, it speaks of conveyance and quality, but does not speak in terms of quantity. So I think that issue is still on the table. I think the issue our site plan powers are not completely abrogated under the redevelopment law. And part of those site plan powers are to absolutely look at drainage, off-site, on track, and so on and so forth.
Urban design.
The degree to which we do that may be limited somewhat with these, but I'm understanding pursuant to my discussions with both Jason and Aileen Brenner from the Redeveloper Council's office that though that area is still open. I'm also informed from Jason, and I know what I'm going to say is hearsay, but so we're not going to rely on it too much, and we're going to get back it up. The individual that Jason spoke with at DEP said that the city had an absolute right to address this issue of quantity. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. However, when Jason tried to get him, I said, saying something is fine, but not giving us the basis for his decision, the legal basis for his decision is not sufficient, because every applicant and the board are entitled to know the legal basis for requesting something. It turns out that that individual, being the way the system is now designed due to COVID, there are people not in the office, and he is on vacation. So we could not get a written response from him to submit in time for this meeting. But be that as it may, that's my position in opposition to yours. I respect your position, and I agree with it partially, but not completely. I would like Jason to answer your question. Perhaps we can get to the bottom of it or make some progress.
So, Ms. Porter, you mentioned a couple of times the First Avenue project. I looked back at that file. I recalled what happened and looked back and confirmed. There's two differences between that project and this project. The first difference is they are not a major development, which is a stormwater management regulatory threshold. This AP Triangle project is. That's a significant difference between the two. The other thing is the original application, First Ave, came in with stormwater detention and they reduced flows. So in the post-development condition, there was going to be less runoff leaving the site than in the pre-development condition.
So they got the benefit of comparing existing impervious coverage, whereas here we're contractually obligated to remove that impervious coverage because of blight, and so we must compare it with grassland now. Is that correct?
Well, let me get back to that. Let me finish what I was saying first. So through their own analysis and no prompting from us, I don't know who came up with the idea, but they reanalyzed the site with no stormwater control. I mean, they had pipes and inlets and they controlled stormwater that way, but without any stormwater detention, they kept the post-development flows within the pre-development flows. And that's why we had no issue with it. The issue of what is the existing land cover, you make a good point, but the common standard, and you can answer this question for me maybe, the common standard is what's the land cover on the property for the past 5 years? That's the standard the DEP uses when they look at existing land cover.
Right, but then in connection with the compliance letter, why specifically did it agree with the analysis that was utilized, which determined that there was no impact downstream?
On the First Ave project?
No, in connection with this project. So in the stormwater report that was prepared for this project, there was a specific analysis that was done as to impact downstream and whether or not those contributions would have that impact. And so that analysis was undertaken in terms of utilizing the existing stormwater in place, and DEP agreed with that assessment and determined that there was minimal impact and that it would not have a significant impact downstream. Was that not part of the Kafra compliance letter?
So what I looked at, same as First Ave and every other project, is to compare the pre-development flows and the post-development flows. And the prior to the revision that you guys recently submitted, the report showed an increase in percentage-wise, somewhat of a significant increase in runoff from the site in the post-development condition as compared to the pre-development condition. And that's why we raised the question.
So the standard in connection with this is vacant land?
That's my understanding. I believe that's been its condition for the past 5 years.
Okay, and do you know why that is the condition of the property?
Yes, I heard the testimony earlier.
Okay.
Hey, John Moore, I got a Jason, I think you might have answered part of my question. I was going back to some of the history of this, which Jim was bringing up and everything. This was originally, and the blocks and lots have been changed, block 142, 131, 143, which is 177,000 square feet. Now, if we go to pre-development, and I was here, Eric, you were here, that lot was 100% built out. That lot is a lot more, the law is 90%. I think they say they're going to be at 78%. And again, it's 177,000 square feet. And at one time, they have the right to build 164 units on it, but they're only building 48. So what they're proposing to build, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but is a lot less than was on that lot 10 years ago, be it hotels, be it streets, be it everything impervious. So there actually is a reduction in my guesstimation of what's being built and what was there in the past. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know that that would change the overall impervious cover if the density were greater.
Also, we can't consider all of the street, all of the public right-of-way, which was vacated to assemble these lots, to have been impervious.
So the common standard, the one that the DEP uses, is what is the land cover in the past 5 years. And this has come up with other applications throughout the city. And the engineers understand that's the standard we're always held to. I understand this one has a bit of a twist to it because of an obligation, but that is the standard for runoff.
So in order for us to get the benefit of a different means of comparison, we would have to be in violation of our existing agreement with the city? I just want to understand that, if that's the board's position.
Can you explain that?
Not the board's position. We're saying that it is what it is. Jason's saying that you're stuck with it being raw land because it's been that way for 5 years, and that's the basis from which the decision is made by DEP.
Right, but that decision was made by DEP here. DEP reviewed this application, and when they undertook the analysis, they did not take a consideration in a comparison against existing. That's the point, because there are other agreements in place that dictate what improvements are to be made. And I know we're trying to distinguish between quantity and quality and otherwise, but the fact of the matter is that DEP looks at everything in the context of approving overall compliance with Kafra. It doesn't turn a blind eye. It looks at the most current regulations. It's a permit. It's revocable. DEP has the right to impose further conditions with respect to the property, and DEP did not. If we look at the express language of what they wrote in that letter, they chose not to. And that's what's important. So, and furthermore, to the extent that we're relying upon conversations.
According to my expert, he's saying that letter or that Kafra permit does not speak to quantity.
Understand, but we have something in writing from DEP. You're basing your determination on a hearsay conversation that we don't have the right to reproach on.
Yes, you will,
in the context of this
bring
hearing.
that individual back in by subpoena at the next meeting if necessary to get to the bottom of it.
We would also, to the extent that the board or its consultants are relying upon a determination or advice from Redevelopment Council, like Redevelopment Council's position to be set forth in writing.
Yes.
I think that's unfair. I mean, I think you guys also got to characterize the position of DEP by saying that they were very happy about all of these things. So I think it's probably only fair that they give testimony.
They got to give us something because they got us at a standoff.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, Ms. Porter, but you guys submitted revised plans with a stormwater system. Is that what's proposed?
No, because we wanted to work through the legal issues first in terms of what the obligations are in connection with the subsequent developer. We undertook that analysis and showed on the plan what could be done, but the issue is that utilizing the measures in which you mentioned, there could never be full compliance with that requirements at this site for a number of factors, which our engineer Sean Delaney had alluded to in his testimony, and certainly which Mr. Curley could address now. But the fact of the matter is, even that design doesn't specifically get you back to the ratio that you're looking for here. And so, because there are a number of factors that need to be undertaken for consideration. even
this-
though the lots themselves, oh, go ahead.
I was
I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge.
Yeah, this is just me speaking, but I would love for the board to hear what that revised design does for runoff.
Right, that's what I was getting ready to ask, because even if it's doesn't meet what Jason was referring to, if it does diminish or reduce the runoff that was initially proposed, I mean, I think the board would be interested to hear that.
Right, we understand that, but the question, there's an underlying fundamental question to be addressed first, which is that what is the legal obligation of the applicant to require that specific type of stormwater improvement at this site? That, you know, we're going back to all of these legal arguments, and all we're hearing is that, oh, well, DEP told us something different, when we have a written confirmation and a letter. You know, what is the legal effect of the letter if it can essentially be undone? Why is it required?
Well, wasn't there a statement that that's like the minimal requirements, and that a jurisdiction has the ability to impose a little bit stricter requirements? Jack, wasn't that discussed?
I'm sorry.
That the approvals by DEP and the Kafra Permit are the minimum standards that are acceptable, and then the jurisdiction, it's within their right to, you know, ask to go further to mitigate stormwater runoff if they feel that it's
DEP's Are you referring to DEP?
I'm saying that
it's their minimum and they could impose additional?
No, that we could, our jurisdiction could impose additional. Like the approvals are the minimal standards that are approved, and anything that the jurisdiction would be able to ask for more.
No, you don't go to one agency and then come back and then the bar is raised across the board higher. I was just referring to the one area of the quantitative flow. And again, in all fairness to everybody in the process, we have an individual, again, and it's hearsay. I get that. I'm not asking you to vote based on that, because I wouldn't dare do something like that. But there's an individual who has voiced an opinion to Jason, who I believe, okay, and I don't think anybody here is being untruthful, but without that individual being able to tell us where he gets the basis for that comment, we can't. I'm stuck. I'm certainly not an engineer. I don't. If I read all the hundreds and hundreds of pages that Bob created for the waterfront infrastructure improvements and the DEP permit, which is a 98 or 100 and some pages, I'm not going to understand that. That's not what I do.
Then what is your suggestion?
Well,
my
suggestion is
how
that
do we get past this impasse?
the only way to get past the impasse is one of a couple of options. One, we can get Redevelopment Council to issue a letter based on giving us an opinion, and get this individual from DEP to either issue us a letter or agree to testify. More than likely not going to agree to testify, but at least give us a letter citing the basis for his comments so that we can look at that and say, yeah, that's correct or not. And then if he can't give us the basis for those comments and we don't get sound foundations, then we shouldn't be able to require anything further. If this is the end of the line, then this is the end of the line. But if they're telling us that it's not, and there's other factors that can be considered, and the board can impose some additional reasonable restrictions on quantity runoff, then we need to know that, and we need to cite that to the applicant so the applicant can see that we have that power.
I agree. I think that's the direction we should move in, because we just seem to be going around and around, and until we get some real definition as to what the legal ramifications are, I think we're not making any progress here.
And I guess as an aside, it sure would help to find out what the future intentions are regarding that outfall pipe, because it seems to me that at some point that's the 500-pound gorilla in the room.
I have a question for Mr. Curley. This is Rick Lambert again. So when the Waterfront redevelopment area infrastructure and stormwater management plan was developed, you mentioned earlier that the outflow pipe was not really addressed. There was no consideration for that in the development of the overall plan.
That's correct.
That seems like that would be a pretty serious thing you would have to consider. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like that should have been addressed, or at least considered when the plan was being developed. Because you're saying all of this development meets the requirements, but then it can't get out because we have an outflow pipe that won't allow it. Seems contrary.
That's correct. That's why the applicant, we agree and we support getting a written determination from Redevelopment Council, which specifically, indicates what the legal framework is with respect to stormwater control measures within the waterfront redevelopment area. And we want a determination from Redevelopment Council as to whether or not the board has the right, pursuant to the MLUL, to trump the existing agreements in place.
I think we need to do that.
I would agree.
I mean, as to DEP, the fact of the matter is we have written evidence. So the fact that now the board is wishing to go back to DEP, we have a letter. We went through the entire compliance review process, and so pulling DEP into the equation to second guess the application, in our opinion, we went through and complied with every single requirement, as we indicated previously, that we were obligated to do with DEP in connection with this site already, and have the compliance letter. So now we're going back to undo that process. That makes no sense. And
I don't think we're questioning the correctness of the Kafra permit, and I would hate to characterize it that way. I think we're speaking specifically to something that wasn't addressed in it, which is quantity.
Right, but the applicant here is being harmed. This application is being harmed by virtue of hearsay conversations with DEP.
No, they're not.
We were not a party to.
Delayed. They're being delayed a couple of weeks longer. They're not being harmed. The outcome is I asked the board to rely on that hearsay, which I would never do. Then the applicant certainly would be harmed. But asking to delay to get a validation or an invalidation of the comment, you're not being harmed. You're being delayed.
This is Mike Manziel. Just to make it abundantly clear, again, a question for Mr. Curley. Is there no requirement in the waterfront redevelopment plan for stormwater quantity other than the site must be 90% impervious or less? Just to make it abundantly clear.
The determination would be if the conveyance is sufficient not to cause downstream flooding. In this particular instance, because the lake has a undersized outfall, that is what's causing the flooding, not the individual properties that contribute to the lake.
But it's downstream flooding or any off-site
So if
flooding? I think it's to the nearest the off-site flooding.
Okay, so let me answer the question a little bit differently. So if this were, so as an example, there's drainage that comes from Convention Hall and gets all the way to Wesley Lake. That's just the way the system is set up. If there were flooding that occurred caused by Convention Hall, or the drainage area from Convention Hall caused flooding on Ocean Avenue, where water was coming out of the inlets on Ocean Avenue, but still had free flow out the lake, that would be a conveyance issue. Because the lake is flooding, it's not, the lake is flooding because it has an inadequate outfall. If the lake weren't flooding, we would not be having this conversation at all.
If the pipe leading to the ocean were bigger, all of the water going to the lake would be able to escape in adequate time, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
That's half. That's half.
Half.
just since we're clarifying, the outfall pipe into the ocean and the weir that's holding.
Correct, at the outlet structure.
They work together, right?
But that is
Well,
not
when
the
there's
case.
when there's a heavy rain, or any heavy discharge, it goes right over the top of the weir and the dam. I mean, the weir doesn't have to be open.
Correct.
And let me just say, Jack, if you're getting something from DEP, I don't want another letter, because we're going to debate the letter and say, what does this mean? What does that mean? I like what you said at the beginning. Subpoena somebody and get Mr. Jones down here. As far as I agree with Jason, and the most recent report I have is amended and restored infrastructure component report, City of Asbury Park, revised last June 13, 2018. And as far as storm sewer, all it keeps on saying is all the siltation chambers have been sized to accommodate the future build out of the redevelopment area, thereby eliminating the requirement for individual developers to provide water quality measures. Everything's quality, not quantity.
Would it be of any help to everyone involved, that conversation that I assume is going to take place to start off with this gentleman from DEP, let it be both Jason and Bob on that conversation? Would it make any sense?
Yeah, no, I think that that's appropriate, given, you know, it's so hard with one party having hearsay and then another party having hearsay. So I think that would be only fair.
In all fairness, to get
The
both sides.
Kafra, and just, I think everyone understands this, the Kafra application was a co-applicant application. It was Asbury Partners and the city of Asbury were the co-applicants on it. So yes, it would be appropriate to have a representative from the master developer with Jason when he's talking to the DEP.
You've been around with this thing as long as I have and John Moore has, so sounds like you're the guy that should be with Jason. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have any objection to that?
I just want to understand the board's position with respect to, you know, what the meaning is of the letter. Is it the board's interpretation that that letter is limited in some fashion and so therefore needs clarification from DEP? Has the board required DEP to be subpoenaed in connection with other applications or relied upon the compliance letter from DEP?
This is the first time this issue's come up.
So what has been the past practice of the board with respect to stormwater improvements in the waterfront redevelopment area?
Jason, you're up.
It's been a site by site. The first thing we look at is major versus non-major development. It's a matter, we understand the infrastructure component report. There's a larger play here and all that. Typically what we're looking for is that the post-development flows do not exceed pre-development. And I'll say again, that this is a unique situation because of the waterfront redevelopment plan. And it is feasible and has happened in other places, not in Asbury, but in other places where regional stormwater management facilities are put into place so that individual developers don't have to do this. I haven't seen that for quantity in any of the documents I've read. It's all been conveyance and quality. If the lakes, the 3 lakes, were discussed in his reports for quantity, that would be a different story. Or if there was a large basin somewhere, an underground chamber somewhere, something like that. I haven't seen any of that. And we know that there's a flood issue, and we hear from residents all the time about the flooding issues. So we have to give consideration to each site's contribution to the issue of flooding. So that's why we look at each application individually and consider the picture as a whole and make sure steps are being taken to reduce or avoid impact on quantity.
So have there been any applications in the past where peak of existing versus, you know, as built resulted in an increase in runoff, but no stormwater improvements were imposed?
For major developments, not that I can recall.
So there have been no specific applications where that analysis was undertaken.
Where that in it, I think what you're saying is,
Where you use that analysis and ultimately no improvements were required within the waterfront redevelopment area. I'm not talking about other areas.
But isn't this the first application under the site-by-site allowance that the city council approved? Rather than the full block development?
First major.
Right, it's the first major site-by-site development.
Yes, but there's been block by block development, which has also gone through where we looked at South Grand, Monroe.
Define major. I mean, this is 48 units. How much is 215 first?
It's a legal threshold, major. It's a legal threshold. Jack or Jason could say it, but it is a.
yeah, it's an acre of disturbance is what it is.
Jason looked that up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because South Grand and Monroe were both vacant as well prior to their being built and were not required to undergo these obligations.
I couldn't say, I don't recall the specifics of that.
Okay.
So how do we move forward from here?
I think we need some answers from some individuals who aren't present.
Okay. So we would like to have Mr. Curley and Jason meet with
Chris Jones
to discuss the quantity issue and whether we can ask the applicant to implement some additional mitigation measures. Is that the crux of it?
Well,
Or is that door been shut by the issuance of the Kafra permit and the other documents that they reviewed?
my understanding of the original reason we've been talking about Chris Jones, I mentioned at the last hearing that I called him for clarification on the letter to ask him the details of, and I know this is hearsay, we're going to get him to confirm.
Well, don't go too far with it.
I won't. I wanted to understand the DEP's level of detail in their review on the quality and quantity and all that kind of stuff, and he answered me.
Okay.
The crux is, he said, listen, if the city has a problem with flooding, you have every right to require the applicant to do more. And that is what I understood we're going to him for confirmation of.
Yeah.
So can we have Chris testify rather than just send a letter so that he can be cross-examined by both parties?
Can we have a representative of the applicant be present on the call in addition to our consultant so that?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So any
Yeah,
communications whatsoever with DEP, we would want to have a representative as well of the applicant in addition to Mr. Curley, so that, you know, both sides are equally represented.
Does anyone have a
Certainly.
problem?
And then the board is requesting a letter, a written legal determination from Redevelopment Council?
Yes. Michelle Alonso, are you still there? I see your face.
She's on
Michelle?
mute.
Irina, can you get Michelle?
I'm here. Wait.
Oh, okay.
I'll unmute myself.
No, I get it. Let's get you under oath. Please raise your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
I solemnly swear the testimony about the giving this matter to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state your name for the record and your affiliation with the city and the redevelopment process, and so that we have some idea of why you might be here.
Michelle Alonso, Director of Planning and Redevelopment, and I'm a licensed professional planner.
And you work with the TRC and the redevelopment agency, which is the mayor and council on project?
Yes, I'm an advisor to the city council when they act as the redevelopment entity.
Right. Okay. So did I have you, after the subsequent discussion with you, did you speak to the redevelopment attorney's office?
Yes,
Okay. Without necessarily telling me what their opinion is, they did give you an opinion?
Yes, they gave me an opinion.
Okay. So would there be any problem with asking them to put that opinion in writing to the board and to the applicant?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay. Jennifer, satisfied that from that perspective? Yeah, I mean, the idea here is we're trying to resolve a major issue that has not only immediate implications, but long-term implications for everyone involved, and a redevelopment plan that's been rolling along for 20 years. So obviously, fairness and openness and getting to the gist of things is really where I'm going with everything. So yes, of course, have the right people speaking to these individuals to get the answers, and perhaps with a discussion, he may voluntarily. When you start subpoenaing state employees, they start giving you excuses as to why they can't honor the subpoena, and I don't want to be going to court spending inordinate amounts of money from the city, be chasing them. So we might be able to get more with a pound of sugar than with a quart of vinegar by talking to him and perhaps getting him to voluntarily come. And if need be, we could always address the subpoena issue as a result of the conversations between members of the applicant, Curley, and Jason Fixter.
Jack, can you just, can we clarify, because there was one thing that the board was agreeing to, which is that any communication with DEP will have a representative from the city, the master developer, and the applicant, but it's with any conversation with DEP or communication relative to this application.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to talk about anything else, right? Yeah, no, you're right, you're right. Let's put that limitation. Let's not go off in left field somewhere. It has to do with this specific application only.
And I don't also want to re-adjudicate previous applications.
No, we don't intend to.
Okay, thank you.
No.
So Jason, will you coordinate that meeting or conference call or however it's going to be done?
I will.
Okay.
Jason, when is he back?
Going by memory here, I think it's later this week. I can look it up while we're talking.
Okay. Do we want an individual? You got the two engineers, you got a representative of the applicant. You want somebody from the board to be there? Or
this is more. I want the redevelopment attorney to be on the call.
Okay, that's good.
We would have representatives from the applicant and the master developer. So Brian Cherubka would appear on behalf of the master developer, and then we would have representatives of the applicant.
Okay.
All right. And Mr.
I would
Delaney
suggest
can be there
talking to
too.
this individual before 5 or 6 people ambush him. So you want his cooperation. You don't want him to, do the bureaucratic
Right.
two. Yeah.
So restate what people are going to be on this part of this discussion. It's going to be Jason, Mr. Curley, Brian Cherubka, the redevelopment attorney. Who is that?
Joe Mazzariti.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jack, I looked it up. He returns tomorrow of all days.
All right. Well, that's all right. He's first day back. It's going to be crazy. So you got to give him. You don't want to slam him with this first morning. He's back in the office.
You can give him a call at 8:30.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we'll get his cell phone. We'll call him when we're done.
Okay, so then I guess that means we'll have to carry this to another meeting, which I think is August the 10th. Is that acceptable to you, Jennifer?
Yes, I believe so.
Thanks for being patient with us.
And since we're going to be calling Mr. Curley back, no sense in cross-examining on what he already said. He's probably going to have more to say at the next meeting, and we'll have his cross-examination take place all at one time rather than in piecemeal basis.
Okay.
That's what I would recommend. And Michelle Alonso as well?
Yes.
Okay. So assume a motion to, we all know what marching orders are. DEP fella and redevelopment council, members of applicant, master developer, and board or city in on it. We know what we're asking. We know what we want to find out. So can we get a motion to that effect without further notice to carry this, to accomplish that task and come back at another meeting?
Can I get a motion?
Moore moved it.
Jennifer, by your agreement to do this, I assume you're going to consent to any time constraints being waived?
So yes, we consent to the adjournment to the August 10th meeting
Sure.
in connection with this application. But we do note for the record our disagreement in terms of DEP, due to the fact that we went through the entire regulatory compliance process with them before. We consent to reaching out to Redevelopment Council, but we wanted to put on the record our reluctance in terms of retracing everyone's steps in the context of this, because it does impact the applicant time, from a time perspective, from a money perspective, because it curtails our ability to move forward with the development of the site.
We get it.
So yes.
So noted.
This is Mike Manzella, second.
I have a motion by John Moore and a second by Mike Manzella. All in favor to carry, I'm sorry. Yes, all in favor to carry the application to August 10th, 2020 without further notice, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Application carried to August 10th, 2020.
Okay, with no further discussion, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Rick, it's John Moore. Can I just say something
yes.
quick?
Sure.
And I apologize. And go back to what Jack said, the 600-pound gorilla in the room is Wesley Lake. And if anybody thinks that's going to be solved quickly, you're totally mistaken, because right now the DEP won't even say who owns the lake. Let's not forget, half it's in Neptune, half it's in Asbury. Does the state own it? Who owns it? Neptune doesn't give a damn about flooding because they got a 40-foot wall. As far as flooding, I can show pictures in my house to people from the 30s, 40s, 50s with the palace under 5 feet of water. It's nothing new, the flooding there. Again, going back to the history-wise, I wasn't just talking about the road, Sewell Avenue, going through this lot. I was talking about there are major hotels there that go up like 6 stories, and the lot was totally developed. So I just wanted to clarify that. But the main thing I wanted to clarify is solving that outfall pipe ain't going to be nothing done soon, especially in the middle of a pandemic when they can't even decide who to give money to for unemployment to try to get $50 million from DEP. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
In my experience, projects like that take over 10 years, even to get funding, let alone permits. So.
Well, I was going to say a lot of us ain't going to be around, and I ain't going to be around, at least on this board then. So thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I think that's been done.
Move it more. Yep.
Second, Clayton.
I have a motion by John Moore and second by Yvonne Clayton. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.